I'm very, very happy to be able to talk to this particular project last year. Our cloud migration was executed over one weekend in November last year. It's probably one of my most professionally challenging projects, but certainly one of my most professionally rewarding ones. The reason I like to come and talk at these events is because next year I want to hear your story about how you did it. So, all right, you can probably assume at this point that this was a success, right? Because no manager is going to send you to a conference and tell you about how you failed terribly at the migration. So, with that said, let's talk about why we're going to run through an agenda about why we migrated. We're going to take you through the prepare and understand. Speaking to customers this week, they're all keen to know, once you sign and you agree you're going to do it, how do you actually do it? Take them through the mechanics. We're going to prepare and understand how the migration works. What are the mechanics? What are the things we need to be aware of? How are we going to execute, right? And how are we going to do that actual change? Like doing a change with 11,000 people over a weekend is a pretty big exercise. And then finally we'll summarize that and then we'll have plenty of Q&A. All right, so why would you want to migrate at all? Well, I've been involved with Atlassian since about 2006. I'm a server person for a long, long time. I wrote questions for the certification program. I know a lot about server and DC. But our company strategy in 2020 was to reduce our overall footprint in our physical data centers. Now, the answer to that is either move your services to public cloud, AWS, GCP, Azure, or move to a SaaS provider. So we did that with email, we did that with finance systems, and now it was time for the Atlassian team to do the same. There was a desire to move to automated infrastructure deployments using CI/CD so that we could remove, we could have repeatable processes that would scale as the business continues to grow. So a little bit about us. So Splunk had over 10 years worth of history in both server and DC, through probably a dozen different admins over time, so there's degrees of consistency, but plenty of different views on how things should be configured. We had a little over 2 million issues to cover, so not big, but not small either. There was 3.5 million attachments across both Jira and Confluence. There were 3 million Confluence pages, 6.4 million comments in both of those, 40 apps, so kind of no, but about 40 apps. But I think out of all of this, right, is why did we do cloud? Because in my mind, I was thinking, right, what we're going to do is what I've done before, which is simply take our on-premise self-hosted infrastructure and send it to AWS, which I'm really familiar with. Done it before, know how this is going to be, we're done, right? But I guess in a moment which was kind of a challenge to my thinking, right, was our CIO who asked me, have you considered Atlassian Cloud? Now, I've been around long enough to know that there was previously Jira Studio, Jira On Demand, Jira Cloud. So I'd sort of seen the iterations of this. And my own biases was going to be, no, we're not going to do this. But when your CIO asks you this kind of question, there's probably some much larger piece behind it. So I said to our CIO, I said, I'm not going to answer your question right now because I'll probably regret what I'm about to say. So what I'll do instead, give me a couple of weeks. Just let me go and review the current state of affairs. Because I had some biases and I want to make sure I do the right thing by the business, and not necessarily just the right thing by myself. So what that really required was a mental shift of myself. When I looked at what the current state of play was with Atlassian Cloud, that actually, yeah, we could do this. I could bring up technical blockers about why we won't do this, but technical blockers can be solved with engineering challenges. So I'm going to look pretty foolish if I bring a technical challenge that next week is solved. So short story is, yeah, decided, yep, it's time. It's time for us. And so after that little mental shift, we decided the right choice, started to investigate how this is going to work for Splunk. And I must admit, there really wasn't a roadmap about how we're going to do this. There weren't enough customers that had done it yet to even think how we make this work. So we've agreed we're going to do it. Let's get onto it. And part of that was to prepare and understand. And I do recall with my team when I started sketching about how we're going to move to cloud. And it's a bit of a vulnerability at this point because we look after the plumbing. We look after all those upgrades and fixes and things on-prem. And we're going to give that to Atlassian. Can Atlassian possibly run it better than we can? What about our own jobs? And so that's some of the things you need to understand, and part of your preparation is what are you handing over so you can understand what you're going to do in the future. So how do you even start to plan? Like, what are we even going to do? Well, the first thing I did was actually speak to our TAM and get him to ask me some challenging questions. And the actual answer was not technical. I was like, he was actually saying, well, what do you want to do with it? Like, what are you going to do when you go from on-prem to cloud? So I actually started with a migration vision. What are we going to do? And for me, this was this unboxing experience. Everything that we do when people use Jira and Confluence Cloud for the first time should inherently be better. It should be a better experience. If we didn't want a better experience, we would have just taken our self-hosted in public cloud, right? Nothing changes. But we wanted a better experience. So I was very fixed on this day one experience. People use it for the first time, and the core things around create issue, edit issue, update issue should just be better, and they must work. Same thing for Confluence. Create a page, edit page, right? So if you've got the core of the things that need to work, there are things outside of that will be things like integration and apps. You might get some of those to work first time, but that's okay. And then finally, there are things you simply just don't know about. They'll probably break, but that's okay. Focus on that core unboxing experience when you log in for the first time. But you put that in perspective, don't break the business. Like, don't make changes that affect revenue. So we have one big integration that ultimately supports Salesforce to Jira that underpins our business. So whatever we do, don't make that stop working. That's where the license deals come from. That's where the sales are getting driven through that pipeline. So let's make sure that anything we do here, and as a result of that, we had one person who was solely responsible for coming up with the engineering solution for that piece. With all of that, I was really fixed on that vision, like that day one unboxing experience. Don't break the business, but how we get there, completely flexible. I didn't realize later how important this piece was for the solution partner that we worked with. So we're the solution partner, right? Now, my team's pretty technical, pretty good at this, done it for a while. I did entertain for a while that we could probably do all of this ourselves. Don't do that. Absolute mistake to go that far. And so, I thought we could probably save some money. It would be like a champion team who did this migration. No, there are simply too many things going on and many things that you only ever can do once that you shouldn't invest in, right? App migration, things like that. You don't need to worry about that. You've got other things about change and delivery that are important for you that will deliver way more value in the future. So find yourself a partner, because that's going to be one of the biggest decisions you make, and it's going to be really important. So if you've got that vision, you know what you want to do, now start to go to market. Find a partner that both culturally fits, time zone fits, language fits. All of these things are important. I did a lot of due diligence at this point, reading their responses, making sure they understand what we want to do, go line by line. At one point, I even spoke to another vendor who we thought was possibly had underquoted, because we didn't want to get a situation later where we'd have to get a change request and go higher. So really, that's a real important piece to make sure you find a partner that, that's going to work with you. So once you've done that, there's really responsibilities at this point. Now, you are definitely responsible for understanding the tooling. You need to understand the mechanics of how it's going to work. Not necessarily in intricate detail, but you need to understand what each piece does. You need to know your apps. There's absolutely no way of getting past this. I didn't initially, but when you're working through the sales cycle with Atlassian, they will ask you which apps you're keeping and which apps you don't. That's particularly important because you have time when you're running both on-prem and cloud, and there's complementary licensing that occurs. And so they can negotiate on your behalf to make sure that you've got complementary licensing for your apps. Understanding your usage, your use cases, who uses it, what, where, and when is really important, so you know things like apps, where are they going to be used. But you've got to maintain that vision, right? That day one unboxing experience. Make sure your decisions are really focused on that. The solution partner will provide you the advice on the migration strategy. Most of them have done this before. Not for you, and maybe not your exact copy of you, but they've done this before. So you need to respect that they do that, but with that, because we would understand the tooling, we could really call bullshit on what they're saying. It's the last one, it's fine, I can talk. They will be responsible for the app migration. Again, it's one thing that you never need to worry about again. They have far better reach than you could possibly have into the ecosystem, so let them deal with app migration. I saw them as migrating our user base. Again, they've seen it before, they've got options, they've got really good tooling to do it. I didn't really care about it because, again, it's a one-off thing. And then finally, they're going to execute the vision. When we started with our partner, the one thing I said on day one was that at the end of this, we're all going to be friends. Okay, so the decisions that we make as we go, we need to make that knowing that it's a small ecosystem. I'm going to bump into you at a conference at some point. So let's not have awkward conversations later on. So you execute the vision. We will make the answers you need to make that so. So now you've just got three people. You've got three partners. You've got you and the rest of the business. You've got a solution partner in place. And finally you've got the OEM. You've got Atlassian. And so you end up with three roles, three team members. So you've got your cloud migration manager. You open up this thing called a move ticket. The move ticket with your migration manager, that's your friend at Atlassian. You are going to spend a lot of time with them making sure that they're reaching into Atlassian to get the answers that you need. There is a solution partner that's working both with Atlassian and ecosystem partners to get you the result on your apps. They would occasionally have meetings without me, and that was okay because I needed them to talk frankly about the state of the ecosystem, the state of where we are so that we can get us all on the right result at the end. But finally, there's your company, right? You are going to own this. When you do the migration, after all this is said and done, you're responsible for that outcome. So you need to make sure some of those hard calls and the change communication within your organization is occurring. There are some decisions that I made when we were doing this where I was 15 seconds or 15 minutes ahead of where either Atlassian or a solution partner was, but we made them because we knew the impact that would have down the road. So now we all know what we're going to do. We understand the tooling, got the strategy in place. Now it's finally time to execute it. Like this is where, where we hit the road. So we had things. So really, there's 4 pillars of success. There's the user migration, Jira, Confluence, and apps. If we're just talking Jira and Confluence, okay? Now, the user migration is a one-time thing. Now, some people here might not be thinking about 12 months from now or 12 months after their migration, but there are design decisions in your user migration which will impact what you can do in the future. One thing is cloud-to-cloud tooling. No one's thinking about that yet, but we certainly were. It's like, in the future, when we're all in cloud, how are we going to move projects and spaces between sites without having anything on-prem? And so for that reason, all of our users exist in Atlassian Access. No users or groups are actually in any of the sites. Right? You won't have a user clash. So things like that. It's things. Also, if you don't, you can maybe choose not to migrate some users. Well, that's okay. That makes the user list smaller. But it also means you'll have Confluence pages with unknown user or deactivated user in there. The problem with that is 3-4 years from now, when legal comes to ask for a patent dispute, who wrote what, you simply don't know. So we chose the decision that we would migrate all users and then asked our solution partner for a way we could do that. Will you be using single sign-on? Our answer was yes. We're going to secure everything with Okta. That is a corporate decision that's made across all SaaS platforms, so we did the same. Now the things about users and single sign-on is you can do these way before your migration. Set it up early so that it's not something new that you're doing as part of your migration. So all of our users and all of our groups are provisioned in Atlassian Access, and we use skim provisioning from Okta to do that. So that means now my team is no longer responsible for user activation, deactivation. It's all in parity with the rest of the company. But ask your solution partner for options, right? I've mentioned a few things here about unknown user, deactivated user, those things. Ask your partner because they've seen it before. And so make sure that when you understand what you want to do, that they're doing that to make sure that's going to work in the future. We had some things too about internal accounts. Like, what are we going to do with those? That piece we discussed at length to make sure it was a one-way door. We can't come back through it to make sure we get it right the first time. All right, so now we've got user migration done. Okay, let's go to Jira. There are really 2 paths available right now. Right? The 2 paths. You can either use JCMA, which is the Jira Cloud Migration Assistant. It can do site-by-site, can do flexibility, doesn't do JSM, or do site import. Well, we did a full Big Bang switchover because it is the easiest path to explain to people. It's also the easiest from a labor point of view because you were just doing a one-time switch and now you're in cloud. You don't have to worry about on-prem anymore in the past. So you choose one of those 2 paths. Again, this is where I'm fixed on the vision but flexible on the details. We did consider doing JCMA, and one of our solution partners did provide that in their quote, and we're like, that doesn't quite gel with what we're going to do. So we chose the site import to do this. You will need to do many, many trial runs, and the more, the better. So give yourself plenty of time to consider that. We did trial runs to test like the user migration, the site import endpoints. One of the things we did early was, without any optimization, how long does it take right now? If we just run site import, it took our first time we did it, 30 hours. All right, 30 hours is not going to work because we want to do a big bang approach. We don't want to break the business. We want to make sure we have that great unboxing experience. It's got to be better than 30. I remember telling Atlassian that's not good enough. Let's go for 12. So let's aim for 12 hours. How can we get there? So what we did, we essentially wrote a big Python script that used all the optimizations that Premier Support and our Cloud Migration Manager had told us, and wrote into a script so it ran it all in parallel so we get to the bottom. We got it down to 12 hours. It's pretty good. I'm like, for every hour or every half hour we get, that actually buys us time on that migration weekend. So this is around August. We got it down to 4.5. So I was like, okay, we're good. But you got to have test plans of these core features. So there's a member of my team who ran with this piece. She'd done test management at previous employers. And so she said, look, we're not going to be able to test everything, but we need to test everything that people use. Create issue, edit issue, update issue, all of that needs to work. Transition issues associated to our most popular workflows, do those. Be able to create a project. So as luck would have it, one of my team members was in quarantine for 2 weeks in a hotel. And so I said to him, go and learn Selenium. You've got 2 weeks with no distractions. So he went and learned Selenium so he could do UI-based testing. So we could test to make sure that all those features to give that day one unboxing experience were just going to work. All right, so Jira can be a complicated beast with its workflows and its triggers, and God knows what, it was been there for 10 years. So Confluence should be easy, right? Well, it actually isn't. So there's only one migration path available, and that is to use CCMA, the Confluence Cloud Migration Assistant. We didn't put a lot of emphasis on this early because we thought it'd be really, really, really simple. But one of the things that really came undone with us later on was that there were functional differences in the editor. We kind of knew there were, but we didn't necessarily understand the cases. And so what it meant was that we had a different conversation with our end users because we didn't understand it. So there are functional differences in cloud. You need to check your use cases to ensure that you're not necessarily affected. All right, so we've done this. We've got Jira, we've got Confluence, kind of on our way. What about those apps? Well, I have this phrase which is, don't enter the funnel too fat. And that is, you've got all these apps. There's not necessarily a cloud path for them all. You probably won't use them all. You don't know where they came from. You don't know why you're using them. So how are we going to address that? So I have this diagram, right? And it's this double-headed funnel. And really, as you enter your cloud migration, right? You enter this funnel, you need to start to turn off your apps to find those use cases, to find those edges where you're no longer going to use them, right? And for those apps that don't have a cloud future, turn them off because you're just never going to be able to use them anyway. So you enter the funnel, right? Don't enter it too fat. The actual neck of the funnel, that is your cloud migration. That's where you've done the optimizations, you've removed the workflows, you've removed the projects you don't need. You get through that funnel, and then when you exit it, that's when all your new features start to get turned on. That is your new cloud world, and you'll see it as it expands out. So part of that is to establish an app burn down. We had a published going for about 3 months that we provided to our end users that said when all this when old functionality is going to be removed. Expect it to stop working at these dates. The reason it was 3 months out is when you found something that was mission critical, business critical, the way to undo it was to just re-enable it. And that would then buy you time to then find another solution that would be cloud first. And so Shrey down here, she ran the app burn down. Every week we'd tell people about functionality that's missing or it's going. But that is time to correct, right? You are going to find apps that you do use, and you need to then find a suitable solution. But part of that too is, yes, you're removing functionality, but as I mentioned about exiting the funnel, you need to provide a timeline to your end users about when the new apps are going to get turned on, right? You're not going to stay in some suboptimal situation for a long time, and it's really important to get that trust from them that, yes, we know you haven't got it today, but after the migration, bear with us as we start to turn it on that new world. All right, so we've done all that. We've got our 4 pillars of success. Now we need to get cloud ready. So Atlassian Access is like, get used to it. This is where you're going to live now with all of your sites, your users, your directories, your billing. Get familiar with it. There were some things in Atlassian Access that I didn't understand in the early days, and so our TAM organized me to meet with a product manager to explain the significance sometimes of grey boxes and what those things meant and what was inside of those. You will need to create the sites. As part of the sales process, Atlassian can't actually quote you until you have your site. Our site is splunk.atlassian.net. That was actually being used by one of our partners, so it wasn't us. That was going to be a hard conversation to have because we wanted to use that site. You could use legal, but I just spoke to that person and said, in a few months from now, I'm going to send 11,000 people to that site. Do you want to have those emails every day about someone getting access? He's like, no, we're only a small company of 50. So just getting those things ready, making sure that those small details were there. But you will need many, many sites. We started with 3. We probably ended with 20 because we wanted to do lots of test runs, not step on each other's toes, allow Atlassian to provision your sites in their migration infrastructure. The migration infrastructure is a little bit different than the infrastructure that other customers use to allow you to do all these transactions. But yeah, so start creating them. Create company 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through. You're not having to create them during your migration. You need to get familiar with some of the cloud technology around the names like sites and organizations. So this is something that you have a shared language with both your cloud migration manager and your partner. We also then came to the collaboration challenge, which was how we were going to talk to each other. So you want to be a leading member of the team. So create a site. We had a Splunk migration site, which we shared with Atlassian and our partner so that we could all use the products we were about to promote. We had to get familiar with the new editor, the new issue view, where are our user accounts working. If we wanted to bring in our other stakeholders in the organization, was skin provisioning working? So we could start to test these with like maybe less than 200 users. Slack or email, how are we going to communicate to each other? Are we going to use the site? And we set up a Slack channel that was probably the best way to just sort of broadcast things amongst the team. You will need to allow time to test the migration tooling. So the strategy you had, whether you're using site import, CCMA, whether it's going to work. And so you need to adapt when the circumstances change. We certainly had some engineering challenges with the tooling, but we certainly did it early enough on the Jira side to make sure that Atlassian had time to push some bug fixes for us. But as part of that, you need to start to record all your timings. I talk about the first time I did it. I talk about the optimizations we did it, so we knew that we were making progress, so we're going to be able to hit that deadline without any problems. We made a runbook that had all the timings all the way through. One of the last meetings we had before our migration date with Atlassian and our partner was to make sure that they knew who was doing what when, and we knew it with accuracy and precision all the way through our runbook. But you need to break from the past, okay? You need to keep questioning whenever you're doing something. Are you simply implementing self-managed practices in cloud? So one of those is release tracks. Now, tracks is one of these things that's promoted as you can batch up all of your releases, or batch up all the changes in cloud, and then do a change request, and then tell everyone they're coming in. That is a self-managed practice. We're not spending this money to get to cloud to behave like server. And so we do things like, no, we're not doing release tracks. All new features get delivered as Atlassian releases them. They have far more data points than you could possibly have to know whether it's going to be successful on your site or not. So get the benefits of cloud by breaking some of these practices. Avoid keeping anything self-managed. Now, I did a reference call with one of the clients from our partner, which was just talking about how their migration went. And one of the things they said to me was, what we thought we'd do is only migrate our active Jira projects and leave our archive ones on-prem. Why would we want to move them? It just kind of increases the scope. What they found, though, was that meant they had to do 2 migrations, because several months later, they realized how much of a pain it is to have these archive sites on-prem. Eventually, you're going to run out of a license. So what do you do then? So we found the best thing to think about is how can we remove self-managed infrastructure as part of this migration? So we did migrate all projects, and then we deal with them in cloud. We've now found that since we've done that, we have a very small footprint remaining, and it's mainly to do with FedRAMP and IL5 that is about 200 users. I'm on the hook for doing those upgrades, and it's a right royal pain now because I'm only ever doing something that affects 200 people, where there's nearly 11,000 people in cloud. So people in my team will say, well, we'd much rather be more effective and do the higher value things in cloud than to do these little things on-prem. So absolutely, if you can decommission and remove things on-prem, it's going to save you a bunch of work in the future. But also remember why you're migrating. think when we got to about, so we started in June, and we finished in December with the migration in November. I got to about August, and I was thinking, like, the migration is not the end, right? We're going to do all this work, but it's things that started to become apparent was we want to get compounding value from the platform. So we had a situation where one of our biggest integrations to do with our products organization and their roadmaps would make more sense if that was actually in Jira Advanced Roadmaps. It doesn't matter how many times people tell you that yep, there's an integration to the product. It's actually nowhere near as good if it's actually in the product. So we started to plan in the week post-migration to move all of our roadmaps into Jira Advanced Roadmaps. And that meant that immediately after we did migration, we were starting to get benefits from the platform. So things like integrations and what we can do after. Start to think beyond the migration. Obviously, don't lose focus that the migration is really important, but then think about what are we going to do with it afterwards. You don't want to be in a situation where your CIO approved this, you did the migration, everything went fine, then they ask you, what next? So start to think beyond cloud, because some of those beyond cloud things will be design decisions you'll be making during your cloud migration. All right, so we've done all this, we've executed it, well went well. I'm usually the first person down here that usually asks, that's all well and great, but what would you do differently? So, what went well? Jira migration, absolutely fantastic. No problems there, went really well, we understood it, we absolutely nailed that day one experience. The UAT was for a month, people ran that went really well, nothing there we hadn't found. Again, a lot of emphasis on Jira because we knew that was going to be the complex one. The site import is a pretty easy process to understand, went really well. The big bang approach, just going from Friday at 4:36 p.m, switching over. There was some cleanup work on the Saturday morning, but by the Sunday morning, 9 o'clock call, we said, yep, we are good to go. The app migration with the vendors, we had like 3 tricky ones. They all came to the table, they all did the job. That went really well. The integrations, I mentioned before, as you expand out from your core features, we had 76 integrations. All of them but one went really well. The one that didn't go really well, all 5 team members were on PTO that week, but that's okay. Can't do much about that. We created this thing, again, sometimes some of your best ideas happen when you're just like walking around, right? I had to shift my car one day to what I call the good spot. And as I was shifting to the good spot, I was thinking about our teams that do security. And those security teams need 24/7 access. So in our migration strategy, we were talking about Splunk would not have Jira and Confluence for a whole weekend potentially. That's a potentially security vector. There are hundreds of people outside our project team that know that Splunk won't have its core functionality to do security incident review for a weekend. That could be a potential problem. So we created this thing called a bridging site, or a bridging tenant. So what it was that we created a site that was better than a spreadsheet, but not as good as your fully fledged Jira. And it allowed those teams to migrate in their own time. So it was made available to them the Wednesday before. They could go and create their API keys, they could move themselves in, they could start logging issues that they're going to do, they could set up their incident process, but it had a deadline, which was after we've migrated on the Wednesday, you need to get out. But it meant that took off the pressure from us, these 24/7 teams that could potentially be driving a timing constraint for us for our migration were no longer a problem. They were taken care of. And so this bridging site came as like this idea that we floated around, and then that is how we've done a Confluence migration with 24/7 teams. On that Sunday morning at 9 o'clock, we've all gone through, we've all checked, Jira's working fine, Confluence is working fine. Our original plan was to wait until Monday morning. One of the questions I always had was, if we wait, do we get a better result? And if the answer is no, then we should do it now. This came about when we're looking at priority schemes. So there are no priority schemes in cloud, right? Thought this was a big problem. We thought, okay, let's start on server, going through, removing priorities and changing the projects. Well, when you think about that, if we start that now, are we going to finish by the time we get to our migration date? Probably no. Is it going to break the business? Probably no. So let's just do that in cloud. So we decided that some things were just better, just wait to fix it in cloud. So we got to this 9 o'clock meeting, everything was working fine. We can wait 24 hours. Is there any benefit in that? No. So let's start opening it up. So we started to message people in Slack saying, Jira's ready. Like, if you want to use it, come and use it. It's quiet because it's Sunday. By about midday, Australia and APAC is starting to come online. And we started to get feedback, which I didn't ever think about. When our colleagues started to use it in other countries, it was like, it's working. Like, it actually does what you said it would do. Like, they were getting that day one unboxing experience. And so what it meant was APAC used it first. We had a few things they just reported. We dealt with those. Then EMEA started to use it. That worked fine. And then by the Monday, this was the Monday before Thanksgiving. Now, 50% of Splunk's workforce is in the US, and a large proportion of that was on PTO that week. That's the reason we chose it. So when our US colleagues started coming in, Australia already used it for a day, Europe had already used it for a day, and so a lot of things just worked for them. And so during the course of that week, there were some minor things we did, but it meant by the following Monday, when everyone came in, it all just worked. Yes, there were some rough times, but they just didn't see it. So progressive worldwide access, like there was absolutely no reason to hold it back. Let's make it work. But what didn't work? Well, one of those things is when we work with the partners, we didn't realize we had a blocker. We just thought they were just going through something hard. And so we started to instigate a rule that if you brought the same problem to the stand-up 3 times in a row, there was probably a problem. We had a problem with Zephyr, and it was to do with some internal infrastructure. And so once we realized it was a blocker, we get them unblocked and moved really quickly. So this happened a couple of other times, again, the rule of 3s. That meant that we knew that we had a problem. Now, I mentioned Jira worked really well. Our Confluence UAT didn't go real well because we caused a problem. We left Confluence too late, and then we had some problems with the tooling, and then we had to get some things fixed, which took up some time, which compressed the Confluence UAT. So while the core features are working, there were edge cases to do with nested body macros that didn't quite work, and we didn't quite pick them up in time. And that meant we didn't understand the Confluence editor use cases. So we did get to a situation on our like 11th hour where we're talking to our stakeholders about, we found this problem. We're working with the app vendors to get it fixed, but it's Friday at 5 o'clock in Switzerland. They're not going to be able to roll that fix until Sunday afternoon our time. Can you have some confidence with us and let us go ahead? Because they could have said, no, we're not going to do it. And so yeah, we worked with the app vendors, solution partner, they gave us the green light, and then we moved across. So certainly, don't think Confluence is easy. That's what I keep saying to people is make sure you give it enough time to ensure you can find those cases. All right, so in summary, so we've done all that. So very much, you got to focus on that migration vision. Like you're doing something new. Even though Confluence DC and Confluence Server have the same name at the front, so Confluence DC and Confluence Cloud have the name at the same front, you are essentially moving to a new platform. So treat it like that. Treat it like going to a new vendor. It is significantly enough different like that. I certainly thought when I got to the Wednesday and I dropped my kids off at school and I realized we've actually pulled this off. But 6 months previous, if you'd suggested we want to shift both our email and our finance system on the same weekend, people would think you're nuts and you wouldn't get approval. But we shifted 2 big systems with that success. You need to choose the migration pathway that agrees with both that vision and those business objectives. So don't break the business, making sure that you give that day one unboxing experience, ensuring you take care of those 4 pillars of success. Now, because there are multiple pathways for Jira, a single one for Confluence, by treating it as 4 pillars, you can focus on making sure you've got each of those really well buttoned up and they're going to work for you. Don't enter that funnel too fat. I've spoken to enough people now that are talking about just leaving the apps on to the last minute. No, because you won't find the problems and you'll have this compounding effect where you have end users now wondering why it doesn't work in cloud. It's a much different conversation when you know it's not going to work or you're going to turn it off and you tell them about it than when you get to cloud and it doesn't work and you have to tell them that that's not going to work in the future and now they need to find a solution for it. And certainly prepare for product changes. Our total migration was from June, migrating in November, and then it was like, okay, we need to get through the first day, the first week, and the first month, right? And in those 6 months, there were significant product changes that occurred. That's going to happen in cloud. And I've spoken to 2 people here who talk about they're going to plan to have their migration run over 2 years. That's nuts, right? Can you imagine going down a river with like legs in 1 or 2 canoes, like one on each side? You've got to navigate that the whole time. So the sooner you can compress that, the better you can make it for everybody. And then finally, the partner. You have to choose a partner that understands your vision. One of the things we had as well was script runner. So we need to make sure we choose a vendor that can just do that for us, right? And make sure they're not pointing fingers in all these different directions about it's someone else's problem. because you, again, be really fixed on that vision. Engage with Atlassian early. I did talk about a move ticket. So in the support portal, you open a move ticket, you then work all the way through that, so there's always a single thread of truth about what's been going on, and certainly identify those blockers and adapt as they come along. Like we had times in ours where there was a challenge. I think of one in particular. On a Saturday morning, the solution partner thought of something, I was eating my toast, and I said, we found this problem in Confluence, like, what are we going to do? And I thought, wow, that could really ruin this project. Like, I was sort of sitting there, and so I thought, okay, what have we got? What haven't we got, but what have we got that is actually working? And so by about midday, we had this kind of idea of like some scratchings about how we're going to get this thing to work. And then by the afternoon, we kind of got a solution to it, shared it with the partner, shared it with Atlassian, and like, it was like MVP, it was going to work. And so, again, it was a blocker. We could have just thrown our arms in the air, but no, we're able to adapt. And this happened several times with the different parties. And certainly with our project manager, there was always that empathy, and she rang me and she said, we're doing a trial run for UAT, and we're going through it, it's not going as planned. I said, it's okay. We're going to get there. There's going to be some bumps in the road, but still fixed on that vision. We always kept coming back to that to make sure that we all get the result we want.